All right, here we go. The Rocky Mountain Instinct Powerplay A50.
Okay, don't die, don't die. Whoa! Oh my
God! With a balanced approach to the climbs as well as the descents, the Instinct is one of the most versatile e-bikes I've ever ridden. It doesn't care if it's going uphill, downhill, side hill, as long as it's in the hills, it's happy. It also happens to be the most expensive bike in our test. Does that make it the best? Stick around to find out. We'll cover some of the key details very quickly here. The Instinct Powerplay rolls on 140 millimeters of rear travel, and that is paired with a 150 millimeter fork. Both wheels on this bike are full 29-inch wheels without the added length that generally comes from a 29-inch rear wheel on an e-bike. Where Rocky places the motor allows them to keep those chainstays nice and tidy, right where the pedal version of this bike would be at 439-ish millimeters. And using Rocky's Ride 4, the geometry is very adjustable. You're able to change the head tube angle from 64.2 degrees all the way up to 64.9 degrees, and all the other things change a little bit with that as well. The Instinct uses Rocky's Dynamy 4.0 drive system, which quickly became my favorite when I rode it on the altitude. Not only does it deliver a ton of power with 108 Newton meters of peak torque, it delivers that power very smoothly with a dimmer switch-like feel rather than the on-off feel that a lot of other e-bikes get. It is almost so smooth that, for better or worse, sometimes you forget you're pedaling an e-bike. Out of all of our test bikes in this Value e-bike Showdown, the cockpit display controls are the sleekest. There's a small controller on one side and the Jumbotron mounted on top of the top tube. And that Jumbotron is awesome because you don't have to have an app to change any of the settings in the bike. You can do it all straight from the bike. The Instinct comes with a 720 watt-hour battery, and while that is the biggest battery in the test, I don't really think it has better range than the other bikes. Keep in mind, this bike has a more powerful motor, so it will be pulling more juice from that battery. I think it ends up evening itself out, and the bike is pretty average in terms of range. Let's talk about one sticking point with the Dynamy. It can be a bit of a fickle beast. Most e-bikes don't really like it if you're sitting on the bike when you power it on. The Instinct just really won't work if you do that. Get off the bike, turn it on, get on the bike. It also doesn't like it if you keep a foot on the pedal while you're sitting, taking in the view, getting a drink of water. It will yell at you if you do that. Anytime the motor starts acting up on this bike, get off, run through the system, find the calibration, calibrate it. It'll take you 20 seconds, gets everything back to normal, you're on your way again. So now let's jump into how this bike rides. It doesn't really surprise me that the Instinct is probably my favorite climbing bike out of all of the bikes in this test. Not only does it have more power than all of the others, which never hurts, it also has really good balanced geometry. It allows for a very neutral and comfortable seated position and a lot of control over your bike on the climbs. The geometry on the Instinct is very all mountain to me. It's not extreme one way or the other. They didn't really pigeonhole this bike. I think it was designed to be kind of conservative in the geometry so that it will handle a wide variety of terrain. That balanced geometry is what allows for a very comfortable and neutral seated position on the bike. You're able to find center between the two wheels very easily, which on an e-bike is super important for me. I would imagine a lot of that comfortable feeling comes from the normal length chainstays. Like I said earlier, where Rocky mounts the motor on this bike, they're able to keep the chainstays nice and tidy instead of having all that extra length at the back of the bike, which is just going to throw things off a little bit. Right from the very beginning, this fits and feels like a standard pedal bike would. Because the chainstays are a little bit shorter and the overall wheelbase isn't huge, it makes the bike a very good technical climber. It approaches technical climbs a little bit different than the Rain, which was also a very good technical climber. On the Rain, you end up riding technical uphills almost like you'd ride them on the downhill, where you take a little momentum, plow through, and you've got a ton of traction to get you up it. The Instinct is a little more balanced in its approach. It offers a lot of power, it offers a really good amount of traction, but it offers a little bit more control and maneuverability than the Rain does. So when trails are really tight and you can't just plow through at full speed, I think the Instinct really shines there. So overall on the climbs, the Instinct ended up probably being my favorite climber because it offers a lot of power, because it offers a balanced approach to the climbs. I think all of that goes to make it the best overall climber. So now let's talk about how the bike goes downhill.
Well, there's a corner for you.
If balanced was the word of the day for the uphills, we're gonna stick with that theme on the downhills. The Instinct offers a very balanced and neutral ride quality, which provides a ton of versatility not only in the terrain it can handle, but in the types of riders who will enjoy riding this bike. It is the type of bike that is up for any task, whether big or small. Think of bikes like the Ibis Ripmo, the Santa Cruz Hightower, the Revel Rail 29. This is the electric version of those types of bikes for me. I've always been a pretty big fan of Rocky's Smooth Link suspension, which is a Horst Link 4-bar, their version of that. It does a really good job of staying active under braking forces, and it does a really good job of moving the rear wheel out of the way instead of it getting hung up on bumps. On the Instinct, Rocky has moved the pivot a little bit higher. Not full high pivot, but they're calling it mid-high. A high pivot bike has the advantage of a more rearward axle path, so you hit a rock and the rear wheel can move back and up, which helps it get over that bump just a little bit easier. There are some drawbacks with that though, because as you compress into your suspension, the bike lengthens, which makes cornering a little difficult. It makes it tougher to get the bike off of the ground, to jump. So Rocky has kind of made a compromise and gone somewhere between a high pivot and a standard normal pivot location. That mid-high pivot offers a lot of the stability and a lot of that rearward axle path benefit without all of the cons that come with that. You combine that with the already very good Smooth Link suspension, and you've got a really good suspension platform that's very versatile and very balanced. The Instinct ate up all of the little trail chatter. It might be a combination of that mid-high pivot and the overall weight of the bike, but the suspension felt really, really good. And keep in mind, this is pretty budget entry-level suspension components. The design, however, made up for it. The bike was very smooth in the kind of rough, high-speed terrain that we rode. Not nearly as smooth and plush as the Rain. I don't know if any bike could be. It was still on that smooth, plush, controlled side of the spectrum. Even though it wasn't quite as stable in the really high-speed stuff, and that forced you to ride a little slower, I think the average speeds on this bike were probably higher than the Rain because you're able to corner faster and you're able to maneuver the bike a little bit better when you can't just go mock chicken in a straight line. The Instinct's geometry is plenty long, low, and slack. I mean, it's a 64.2 degree head tube angle in that slack setting, which is kind of right where you want an all-mountain bike these days. It would never be my excuse for backing down from a big, scary trail, but it would also never be my excuse for not riding a cruisy blue or a flowy green trail. It's the type of bike where you can take anywhere, and the geometry isn't going to make it boring or scary. It always sounds like it's coming off as a negative thing that the bike is, you know, not the burliest or it's not the best climbing. There is absolutely nothing wrong with sitting in the middle and being good at a lot of things rather than truly excelling at one thing. So don't take this the wrong way. And the best thing about those bikes for me is that they completely fade into the background while you're riding. I would rather focus on my riding, my technique, the trail I'm on, than what my bike is doing. So the Instinct fading into the background lets me enjoy my ride more. So overall on the downhills, I really liked this bike. It is a very competent descender without being too big, too burly, too cumbersome. So now let's talk about the value score. Up until this point, pretty much everything about the Instinct has been very positive. It is easily one of my favorite bikes in this entire test. However, you do pay almost $1,000 more than the next closest bike in our test. And I certainly don't think you get $1,000 more out of the components that are on this bike. You do get some intangibles or some things that are tough to equate to an exact dollar amount. Things like the suspension design, the versatility, the ride quality that the Instinct brings to the table, but you're definitely not getting $1,000 better components when you buy the Instinct. I mean, you could argue that on the A30, the cheaper version of this bike, which is still as expensive as any other bike in the test, that you would still get all of those intangibles, and now you're getting a lower quality level of components for the same price. All of this is to say, the Rocky does not win in the value department. I'd give it a 3 out of 5 for value. So who is the Instinct for? It is the type of bike I can happily recommend to any rider anywhere. Someone who's just getting into the sport, or someone who's been in the sport for a long time, someone who is looking to just go out and enjoy a cruisy weekend, or someone who is looking to find steep, nasty, gnarly, rugged trails and push the boundaries and push the limits of what they're able to do. I've always called the Santa Cruz Hightower the most all mountain bike that you can buy, and I think the Instinct is the E version of that. It is the most all mountain e-bike that you can buy. It goes anywhere for anyone. So just to wrap this up, one line bike review for the Rocky Mountain Instinct Powerplay A50. It is as balanced as the yin yang. Thanks for sticking around. Stay tuned. Make sure you don't miss the last couple of videos, and we'll see you next time.